Selamat siang, Pak Arif. Bapak sekarang yang akan presentasi baru Bapak, karena dua lagi belum join di webinar kita. Nanti
Tadi
setelah kita
Teguh,
open,
tadi ada Teguh.
oh iya, ada Teguh nanti, tapi kayak tadi Pak Teguh belum tadi kita chat belum direspon sama Pak Teguh. Jadi nanti informasi dari Pak Akbar, BKF, kita akan mulai dulu, nanti baru kita langsung present. eh, Sorry, nanti kita akan kasih Bapak waktu untuk present pertama.
Oke.
Oke, kita buka Zoom sekarang ya, Pak.
Iya.
Terima kasih. Setelah Zoom dibuka, nanti kita akan persilakan Bapak untuk mulai present ya, Pak. Terima kasih. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today and welcome to the CEDS Unpad session, Recent Indonesian Economic Development in Industry 4.0. Without any further ado, please welcome our first presenter, Bapak Arif Ansari Yusuf, to open the session. Bapak Arif, the screen is yours.
Okay. Thank you. Let me share my screen. Hold on. Where? Sorry ya, something going on here.
Any problem, Pak Arif?
Ini nggak ketemu ininya, window-nya saya screen apa? Something wrong sih. Bentar ya. Window-nya hilang. Coba gini, kalau gini gimana? Okay, can you?
Yeah,
Okay.
we can see that, Pak Arif, please.
Okay, so this paper is actually a result of collaborations between CSIS and ADB last year. This is some part of the analysis on the overall, more broad studies about the new technology on Indonesian economy. So there are many various aspects of the study, but this is the macro aspect of the study. So let me start by introducing you to the background of the study. First, as you know that if we compare the economic growth of Indonesia during in the 80s and 90s, the economic growth starting from 2000 until today has been considered low. So some people call we are stuck at 5% growth. And when you calculate, you realize that in order to escape from the middle income to jump into the high income, according to the aspirations of Indonesia 2045, that we target to be high income in the year before 2045, the 5% economic growth won't be enough to achieve that. And then most of the discussions or debate about this is mostly on the lack of what Paul Krugman called perspirations. So that imply that we need to boost infrastructures, investment. Yeah? Yet the discussion on the inspiration side, which is how slowly Indonesian innovation is actually lower, yeah, or in need of catching up of its neighbor, has not been discussed proportionately. And this debate and concerns about Industry 4.0, yeah, particularly some aspect like automation, robotization, and the Internet of Things, actually is good, yeah, so that we can use it as a reminder, so we can bring back our inspiration-led growth into our agenda or public discourse, rather than traditional infrastructures, capital, and so on. So the questions to be asked in this particular study is actually, it's more about exploration. Yeah? It's more about explorations using the available method, available knowledge. Yeah? If we explore the possibility using certain kind of modeling, what we can learn from it. Yeah? So more specifically, the question is, let's say if Industry 4.0, and whatever it means, is a general broad term, yeah, can be represented by certain form of sector-specific labor productivity shock. And then that sector-specific labor productivity shock is the best that we know in the literatures, in the relevant literatures, particularly the literature that are using computable general equilibrium, because we want to use the same models, yeah, to analyze. So what will be that impact on the Indonesian economy, and what we can learn from this exercise of exploratory exercises? And when we look in the literatures, there are not many actually studies around that use same kind of modeling to do the same kind of analysis. So most of the study we found actually very recent. So 2017, 2018, 2019, yeah. And this is not even about Indonesia. It's about global context, and it's about some country like UK, OECD, or Ireland. Yeah, Indonesia definitely has not been a subject of study of this kind of modeling analysis. So the literature is very thin, actually. So from this very narrow literature. So basically what we did is, what can we learn from this? What these people done? Can we do something? Can these studies inform a kind of similar analysis using Indonesian model, so that when we can explore the impact of Industry 4.0 or something similar in general. So after reading all of this, then I come up with the second study that's most suitable, to be implemented to the Indonesian model. So what we found in this study is actually they use in this WTO studies, they read literature, existing literatures, very updated literatures, and they construct they construct productivity shocks by different kind of sectors. So there are sector-specific productivity shocks that can represent automations and digitalizations. Okay, so and they apply to many countries, and they differ the country according to network. There is an index called Innovation Network Index. So and then we're going to discuss this a bit later. So basically, from this, so we borrow the sector-specific productivity shock. Later, the sector-specific. So we borrow the sector-specific productivity shock from this analysis, and then adapt it to Indonesian context using Indonesian network innovation index. So we can come up with some numbers that hopefully can represent that kind of shock. So the model that we use is actually, it's called Indoter model. So it's a Indoter model is actually a dynamic interregional bottom-up computable general equilibrium model of the Indonesian economy. So dynamic means this is a recursive dynamic run every year toward 2040 through capital accumulation and other dynamic mechanisms. And this is a bottom-up model, which means that each region is modeled separate as a separate economy. So equilibrium price are different across regions. So it's a computable general or computable applied GE model. So it's solved by special software. And the region are connected through trade of commodities and factors, but we can aggregate the model so that we can also represent the whole national economy. And then the model itself can be aggregated into 185 commodity and industry, 34 provinces, and then 6 category of primary factor inputs. But of course, we did aggregate according to most suitable aggregation. So this model is actually not new. It's a long-term collaborations, a result of long-term collaborations between CDS Unpad, the host of this special session since 2006. But it developed into more advanced models in terms of the features and size. So and has been used in various different organizations in Indonesia. And also been used in many published papers, according some of my own. And then just to give the models feature many theoretical relationship, and one of the most important is this production function, but I'm not going to go to this detail. But basically, the purpose of I'm showing you this production function is that because the Industry 4.0 simulation that is going to be implemented is through manipulating the parameter of this production function, which is particularly is the labor part of the model, which is here. Yeah, this one. Okay. Okay, so this is the result, the back of the envelope calculations of the specific labor productivity shocks that we hope can represent Industry 4.0 simulations based on this with WTO global trade model that they use. So we use the pattern, the pattern of the productivity shocks. This is the additional productivity shocks Y on Y per year for each sector, so you can see. And then the size also is a function of Indonesian Network Readiness Index. So this number, despite the variation may be the same, yeah, across countries, but the size is different across country, varying through the Network Readiness Index. And then as you can see here, because this simulation involve mostly robotization, automation, and also digitalization. So you can see that the sector that exhibit highest productivity shock is sector that typically rely on robot automation, like machines, sector, machinery sector, motor vehicle sector, but digitalization can increase the productivity of financial sectors, and then communication sector, and then ICT consulting and things like that. And then the least, the smallest shocks is through this certain like metal processing, natural resource or mineral processing. Actually, it seems that they don't really get benefit much from the Industry 4.0, and agriculture also does not get benefit as big as the other. So, and then I'm sure this will affect the result later. So this shock then applied to the model, to the, and then I will highlight some result. So the first result, the left side is the impact of Indonesian real GDP index. Yeah? And then as you can see that size of the shock here actually generate non-negligible impact on how Indonesian GDP evolve. So this is this one is the baseline. So the GDP before, not before, without the shock, without the Industry 4.0, and this is the with Industry 4.0. So, and then I report the result in terms of the average growth, long run growth. So 2020 to 2030, 2030 to 2040, and 2020 to 2040. As you can see that the baseline growth of Indonesia is projected to be 5.2. This is following IMF most forward or most forward-looking forecast of IMF, which is 5.2. And as you can see, with this Industry 4.0, the economic growth will be higher and become 5.75%. So it's generate additional 0.55% economic growth, which is actually quite large, not for a typical CG simulation. However, I think it's not big enough to generate economic growth that's necessary for Indonesia to become high-income country in 2038 or 2040 as an aspiration in the Indonesian 2045 vision. And then the other aspect of the result that I'd like to highlight is that, as you can see, that this pattern of Industry 4.0 heterogeneity by sector imply this regional imbalance of result, which is actually Java disproportionately benefit from this Industry 4.0. So they gain additional 0.7% economic growth, yet the rest is not as much. So the highest is Bali, but the rest is 0.2. So basically, overall, Java gain double of the benefit compared to the rest of the region because of this pattern of the shock. Yeah? And if you want, okay, and this is the result by sector. So I identified three groups of sectors. I call top gainers, and then medium gainers, and then low gainers. So the top gainer is machinery. This is the machinery production with motor vehicle industries. So this is the sector that gain most from the simulation, and then this is the medium one, and then this is the low gainer. The low gainer is basically low productive service sectors, yeah, and then manufacturing of food processing or food production, and then agriculture, and then this one is mineral sector. So mining sector is a low gainer of this Industry 4.0. So this is the result. You may expect that this result actually direct effect of the pattern here. However, it's not necessarily the case. Yeah, I mean, yes, they affect how the sector generate impact across industry, but if you run through the model, of course, it's not the only aspect that can generate this result. So this is just the result in 2040. So you get more idea of what will the result exactly look like, because that one here is unclear. As you can see here, machinery and then motor vehicle and then finance is the biggest beneficiaries of the shock, but extractive agriculture and food production is not. And then here is the employment impact. This is quite important to look at, because technical, there are some sector, because the labor productivity shocks may also generate lower employment, because if your labor is becoming more productive, if your demand is not high enough, in certain condition, you may have lower demand for labor. But what we see here is not necessarily the case. For example, for machineries, the employment also have the highest impact, positive impact. So Industry 4.0 robotization is not necessarily generate lower employment. Yeah? But those sector here, the one that doesn't have a bigger shock, actually, those the one who lose demand for labor. I think overall the employment impact is positive to this from this shock. And then I'd like to highlight several factors. They may affect the result. Yeah. So we can learn something from here. So for example, if you can see here, this is the result of the simulation, yeah, in 2040. This is the productivity shock, the exogenous productivity shock that we introduce exogenously. Yeah? And this is the result on output. You may see that in general, the higher the shock that we introduce to the sector, the productivity, the higher the output impact. However, it's not necessarily the case, because, for example, as you know here, so you can say that the two sector high impact is simply mostly because they have the highest labor productivity shocks. And this sector like agriculture and food production also, they have lowest output because of we introduce lower productivity shock. But if you see this cluster, you see that they have similar impact on output despite having quite variations in terms of the productivity shocks. So it means that there are other things at play. Okay, there are other things at play. Now you want to know what at play. So they have different productivity shock, but seems to have similar impact on output. So there are many factors, I think, that pick up by the model. One of them is some parameter of the supply side. Yeah, that parameter of the supply side. One of them is, of course, there will be a labor intensity. I didn't have here, but labor intensity also affect. So it means the sector that has lower that has capital, because by assumption we use only labor productivity shock, so it means the sector who use labor more intensively may gain more. But sector like extractive sector, for example, it doesn't use much labor, right? So they won't benefit much from the labor productivity shock. So that may explain, for example, why extractive sector doesn't have high impact. However, there are other parameters such as elasticity of substitutions in the production. So the more elastic you are, you can see that the more you can get output expansions here, for example. That's from the supply side. So from supply side story, I think there are two things: factor intensity and then elasticity of substitutions. But we may not forget too that there are other demand side. Demand side mean, for example, if certain sector only cater domestic demand, yeah, then it will prevent them from expansions more because of the industry 4.0. That's why here, for example, you can see that the export share, as the bigger the export share of the sector, the bigger the impact of industry 4.0 to that sector, because they can sell the result of the automation of the digitization to the world market. So this is stress the importance of tradability, global tradability of that sector. So if that sector has high global tradability, so it more likely that the sector will benefit more from industry 4.0. And on the other hand, if your product has low income elasticity, so you can see that the output expansion will be high. So what I mean is, if you are talking about motor vehicle sector has high income elasticity. So if you have high income elasticity, it means what? It means that industry 4.0 happening in that sector, the output coming out from that can be sold in the domestic market as well, because of high income elasticity. Yeah, so people can buy the product in Indonesia itself. Yeah, yet, however, certain sector maybe, but we can also increase the sales of those output, not only from domestic sales because of the high income elasticity, but also because of export share. Yeah. So we need then to have a strategic implication how to anticipate this, to make the industry 4.0 get a greater benefit to the economy. Then we may start thinking about something simple like this. Yeah. So this is the result of the exploration. I know some of them may be just trivial, but this is always good to remind us that some basic things of economic theory actually may help us in devising certain kind of policy anticipation from this industry 4.0. So let me conclude first. So I have a 4 conclusion here. First is sector-specific productivity shock representing some part of the industry 4.0 is introduced to the models. Yeah. So the first highlight is that it adds 0.5% additional economic growth to the Indonesian economy. However, is it enough if we talk about 7% or 6.5% growth to achieve to escape from the middle income trap before 2045? Not so sure. And also the results suggest that the effect is Java bias. And then another highlight is that, okay, so we have top gainer, which is machinery, motor vehicle, and finance. But we have also low gainer, extractive industry, agriculture, sector, and food processing. So basically, if we look at this, so it may strengthen Indonesian structural transformations. So because we are lacking. So it's possible that this Industry 4.0 actually may help us in our reindustrialization, or if not reindustrialization, tertiarization. So this basically structural transformation strengthened because we need it now. And then what is the policy implication out of this? Some policy application out of this, I list three at least. First is that if this Industry 4.0 do not generate additional growth enough to help us achieve high income country before 2045, then we need to explore other source of economic growth, which is, of course, for example, human capital and skill formation. The second one is that we should address the non-Java bias, I think, about this, because this is not Java cannot be forever become the engine of Indonesian economic growth. It cannot be forever. So this non-Java bias should be addressed. And the last policy implication I would like to mention is that the modeling exercise that we explore open up some interesting something that we may forget, the implications, such as we also need to complement the Industry 4.0 with openness or international tradability, because there's no point if we are becoming more productive but we cannot sell the product. So we have to open our economy more if we want to sell the product. And the last slide is about the limitations. There are many limitations of this study. First,
Arif, maybe you can shorten your presentation, please.
This is the last slide. So first, due to the lack of relevant national studies, so the sectoral variations of the shock is borrowed from developed country studies. And then second, Industry 4.0 is a very broad term, so we only touch several aspects of it, not all. A third is that the timeline of the technological adoption may not be linear. We don't take into account. And then most importantly, the model does not incorporate skill mobility. So worker can change fast and adapt skill to the new technological condition. So it's not model in the analysis. And then the last one, we also shock the same type of labor, the same productivity shock. We only vary by sector, but not vary by type of labor. But the reason is simply because we don't have enough information to be able to do that. So that's, I think, my presentation. Thank you, and then I will look forward to the Q&A sessions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Arif. So I think you have a very nice presentation and a very interesting topic. Now we have one question in the chat. The question is how to help agriculture and food products to have income elasticity and output expansion. Looks like the machine sector.
It's a very good question. That's actually it's very good, very straightforward, and I think get to the point discussion. Thank you, Mbak. Ini Suryana, Mbak Suryana. So you may pay attention to the simulation, to the analysis. Yes, I mentioned that in the paper, and then the only way, because the only way is to make the two. I think first is we need to be creative to process that food into more more variations in terms of the packaging, or we develop agriculture-based manufacturing. So because I believe, I'm not an expert, but I believe if you process the agriculture product to become more packaged, more processed, in manufacture, So I think the income elasticity will be a bit higher. So we have to develop agriculture-based food processing industry more. Yeah? And then, of course, and that means that we have to manage more our weakest point in Indonesian economic development, which is this agricultural transformation in Indonesia, because Indonesian agriculture has been very low productivity. Yeah, the land holding has been the lowest in the region. Yeah? The size, so it means very less productive. So the small size of land holding prevent us even to do the industrial revolution atau industri 4.0, because you can implement high-tech agriculture if your land holding is small. Yeah? So you can do agree. So, but again, we have to develop more food processing industry, I think.
Next questions from Shomes. Yeah, what specific shocks were given to capture the technologies of industry 4.0?
Okay, so
what are the links between industry 4.0 and economy-wide impact?
Okay,
there's two questions.
Yeah, so the shock is introduced through first to labor productivity. So industry 4.0 will make our labor more productive. So labor is more productive. So it's a labor productivity shock. That's how I implement it. So because of new technology like computer, digitalization, so labor will be more productive. So this is a labor productivity shock. So introduce labor productivity shock. Of course, this is not only this is not the only one representation. Industry 4.0, maybe we also make capital or land more productive. Okay. But I focus on labor productivity, and I think in general in the literatures, most people do that way. The problem is how much, or what is the magnitude of the shocks. So the magnitude of the shock, so I didn't invent it myself. So I just read from the literature. If you have robotization and automations, what will be the labor productivity shocks through each different sector in the economy? So for example, I learned from the literatures that Industry 4.0 will have a biggest labor productivity shocks in machinery production, and then in motor vehicle industries, for example, or digitalization will increase labor productivity shock biggest in financial sector. So then I use that information and then adapt a little bit, yeah, so that reflect Indonesian economy better, then implement that shocks to the model. So for every sector in the economy, I introduce different labor productivity shock. So machinery will have the biggest labor productivity improvement, followed by motor vehicle industry, followed by financial sector, and so on. That number, actually, I didn't invent myself, but from literature.
Okay. So I think we can end your presentation, Pak Arief, Prof. Arief.
Thank you, Pak Maman.
Thank you very much, Prof. Arief, for your very nice presentation, yeah, and then also the research, yeah. So if the participant would like to ask more questions, I think you can ask directly to Prof. Arief, yeah. To Prof. Arief, you can also maybe Prof. Arief, if you have
Sure, I also have the paper, so I can share the paper.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we are going to hear the presentation from the next presenter from Pak Teguh, ya, Pak Teguh Santoso. Please, okay, can you share the screen? Okay, Pak Teguh, please, time is yours.
Yes, thank you very much, Prof. Maman, for the occasion, and in this time, on behalf of our team, consists of Prof. Nur Effendi, Prof. Maman, which is also as chair session, and Bu Vera and Ian, I'm going to present our research output, which is part of research grant from Bank Indonesia 2019, with the title is Predicting the Shift in Consumer Behavior and the Digital Industry Landscape. And here is the outline. The first, we will explain the research motivation and also the objectives, and then we will move to literature review, and then we will short explore about the method, and we will also explain the result and analysis, and then also the discussion. This is I reckon that the topic is interesting for the current issue, such as already mentioned by Prof. Arif, that the digital economy can improve the productivity of many sectors, for instance, the financial sectors, yeah. And the digital economy includes fintech and e-commerce, is proliferating and becoming significant for innovation and increasing productivity, yeah, in Indonesia. However, yeah, the economic opportunities, yeah, created by fast development in digital economy also create the risk on the economy, yeah, caused by the distortion in demand and also the supply side. And the important risks on the economy can include the shift in the consumer behavior and the digital industry landscape. One more thing that should be considered currently is the digital economy also alters the consumer behavior, particularly in spending and saving behavior. They will tend to shift from conventional to the digital mode of their transaction. The data show that more than 50% of adults in OECD countries order or purchase of goods through the e-commerce platform, and that number increase of 15% from the last decade. Yeah, it gave the sign that the digital transaction is growing in significant way. And according to the literature review, yeah, the several aspects should be considered when we explore, yeah, what is the factors affecting the behavior. For example, perceived usefulness, perceived of risk, perceived easy of use, and perceived convenience are the several factors that determine how people to buy online. And in spite of that, hedonic and utilitarian motivation are also closely related with the impulsive buying on e-commerce platform. And it will be a problem in the future when the millennials especially tend to buy impulsive. In addition, also they will potentially appear the present bias behavior. For instance, they will only regards the current consumption activity rather than for the future consumption. And it will be a problem that the future, the millennials will face the problem of it. I mean the problem of debt trap problem, maybe due to the price and bias. And then the digital economy also alters the consumer behavior in using method of payment. Yeah. Prof. Ansori also mentioned that the digital economy improve the productivity of financial sectors, including the method of payments. In spite of that, the development of methods of online methods payments also follow the significant growth of online transaction. And based on the previous literature, the determinant factor affected the consumer preference to adopt mobile payment, such as perceive of usefulness, perceive of easy of use, and perceive of perceived expectancy and innovativeness also affect the intention by people to use the mobile payment. And how is the impact of that phenomena on the consumer behavior in the future regarding the current situation that is indicated by the time to shift of consumer, especially in millennial, from traditional platform to the digital one. And this research is part of our project and extending the previous study already done by our team that investigate the impact of the current saving and spending behavior on the future saving and spending behavior in Indonesia. And we have two main objectives. The first is to predict the shift in consumer behavior, include the consumer planning horizon, preference for saving and spending platform, and preference for domestic or imported product. The one objective is more on the how is the consumer behavior in the future, and the second objective, how is the map of the digital industry landscape following the development in the digital economy. We conduct the several literature review, and we will use as
maybe you still have about 5 minutes.
Okay. We use the literature review, and I'm sorry, we conduct the literature review, and it will be used for the constructing the our research framework. Yeah. The first is shift in consumer behavior, and then is how about the spending behavior, and also saving behavior, preference for domestic or imported product, and the digital industry landscape. In order to answer the research problem, we use the analytical network process, which is the enhancement or development of analytical hierarchy process development by Saati. And as we know that this method is the semi-quantitative method to quantify the judgment from the expert. The NP method holds the three assumptions. When we'll learn about microeconomic theory, utility, the assumption is similar. The first is reciprocal, homogeneity, and accurate statement of knowledge and belief. And the reciprocal assumption can be stated that PC is pairwise comparison between element A and element B. And if we use the reciprocal assumption, when element A is 4 times larger element B, then B is 1/4 as larger as element A. This is the basic principle of INP. And INP methods carry out in 3 stages. The first is model construction, quantification, and analysis. In the first step, we construct the model by literature review and then validated by two-round DLP process to justify that our construction model is valid, and it's the right table is the criteria for our framework that it will be used to determine the objective and the alternative of our framework. This is our INP framework. We have we will start from objective. The objective will be also divided into 6 alternatives respect to all of main criteria and all of the element of in each of criteria, and then we will quantify the model. The first step is conducting the survey using pair-based comparison questionnaire for each of element in our framework. And the step 3 is we will go to the model analysis, and the data gathered from expert and practitioner consists of 14 respondents, which is represent academician, regulator, and also practitioner in the digital economy, such as e-commerce, fintechs, and banking sector. Here is the result of INP model. If we talk about how is the most important objective in the future, in the future, based on our INP model, we feel that the future spending behavior is the most important, should be considered. It means that in the digital era, the millennial potentially will have will change or will shift in their spending behavior. And the second one, the second important is about the future of bank business model, and we will look for the main criteria. According to the INP results, technology is the most important criteria should be considered if we talk about the future of consumer behavior and the future of digital industry landscape. And we will move to the in the more detail the element of each criteria, and the INP results reveal that the convenience from the element of platform offer is the most important aspect, to influence.
You have 2 minutes left.
Okay, to influence the consumer behavior and digital industry landscape. And it is the result of main alternative that in the future the most important aspect should be considered is the change in spending horizon. It means that the consumer, especially millennial, either they will myopic or present bias, or they are forward looking. And the second is about the bank's business model. Here is the result of alternative, and we can compare of each of all alternative, or we can also compare of in each of element in specific alternative. For instance, we can see that in the future the millennials tend to be myopic bias, I'm sorry, the tend to be present bias. Therefore, we can also say that it will be an alert that the people will face the financial problem in the future. And due to the time limitation, I will move directly to the concluding remarks. And this study predicts the shift in consumer behavior and digital industrial landscape following the development in the digital economy. And consumer behavior includes consumer planning horizon, preference in digital or traditional saving and spending platform, preference and domestic or imported product. Yeah. And NP results shows that the first of the various objects, the three most important goals include future spending behavior, future of bank business model, and future spending platform. And the main criteria are considered the most important for finding the best alternative are the technology, consumer behavior, and consumer expectation. Yeah. In the future, the bank business model will shift toward from the traditional to the open banking business model. And people will also potentially shift from traditional platform to the digital ones in terms of both spending activity and saving activity. The consumers, particularly the millennials, will tend to be myopic or to spend their money in the future, and the present bias behavior or impulsive buying is supported by an advancement of digital platform, which is associated with perceived convenience, because for instance, e-commerce can provide anything we want, also to be the most convenient place to buy something, and also perceived usefulness is that offered by digital spending platform. And the second, banking industry should take the preparation to integrate with other financial providers. It means that in the future, the banks cannot spirit from the fintech players, because it will be subject to the relation between banks and fintech. When they come or join together to develop more interactive product, they will create the new opportunity in their business process. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Pak Teguh. I think this topic is very current, yeah, in terms of digitalization in banking, and I think we will have questions here. So the first one is from Pak Aswin, yeah. Instead of using ANP, is it possible to utilize analytical hierarchical process as a methodology for your study? Maybe Pak Teguh.
Yes, thank you very much, Pak Aswin Rifai Pak Aswin for the question. We prefer to use the ANP rather than AHP, because ANP provide the more flexible in order to achieve the research objective. For instance, ANP allow the interdependence between the cluster or element in the framework, and AHP, the framework is only designed for is only designed by the hierarchy line. Yeah? It's not flexible to construct the model. I also invite Pak Ian to give more detail in the model?
Okay, sir. Thank you. So I'll just be brief. So ANP is basically a further improvement of AHP, and there are two advantages that separate ANP from AHP. Those two are a more accurate result and a more stable result. So if you can use ANP instead of AHP, we don't see any reason why you should use AHP for this kind of study when you have ANP available. That's it. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you, Pak Teguh and Pak Ian. Yeah, I think it's already clear about when we use ANP and AHP. Yeah. And then the second question from Mausumi from NCAA India. Yeah. The question is, what are the laws governing digital frauds in Indonesia? So it's about the regulation, and are consumers well aware of the same? Pak Teguh?
Okay, interesting question, but I cannot answer fully true answer. I don't not really about the specific regulation, but I will try based on my knowledge. Yeah, in the digital platform in Indonesia, for the financial sector is regulated by the Financial Service Authority (OJK), and the development of fintech also accompanied by the proper regulation. Therefore, the digital fraud of financial transaction may be low in Indonesia. But for the underground, I mean underground is the part of digital financial transaction out of regulation. I mean the illegal digital transaction maybe have a big problem in the Indonesia. For example, the illegal financial technology in lending, the consumer will have a problem when they can pay their loan maybe. And the other aspect about the fraud is also anticipated by central banks through by developing the blueprint of Indonesian payment system in 2025 maybe. And in my opinion, the Indonesian government also concerned with the fraud of digital technology by preparing some of proper regulation, but to regulate the financial sector or and e-commerce players.
Okay, Pak Ian or Bu Pera, you would like to add or it's enough?
It's enough, sir.
Okay, if it is enough, then I think we should end this session because we have out of time. Thank you very much to all the presenters, ya, Pak Arif Anzori, Pak Teguh, Ian, and Bu Pera here in the CEDS session, Asian Economic Development in Industry 4.0. And also thank you to all participants for coming to this session. And I hope this session can give benefit to you all. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon to everybody. Thank you.